Surrealism is a painting movement that started around the 1920s, and although the painting style is very real, what you see in the paintings is very strange indeed. Surrealist artists were influenced by the unconscious mind, our hidden thoughts, and things that you see in dreams, which is why the paintings often look like dreams too. Some of the most famous paintings ever were created by surrealists, and probably the most famous artist was the Spanish painter Salvador Dali. He was well known for his long, waxed moustache and eccentric behavior. In his paintings, he uses the same symbols and ideas over and again, a melting clock or objects that seem to make up a scene or a face. This picture of an interior shows the face of Mae West, a film star who was popular in the 1930s. Her hair has become curtains, her eyes are pictures on the wall, her nose is a fireplace, and her lips a sofa. And yes, Dali really did turn the sofa into reality. Another very famous painter was the Belgian artist René Magritte. His paintings often show skies or birds or men wearing bowler hats. Everyday objects changed into magical pictures. In the 1920s and 30s, women artists didn't usually get the same kind of publicity as men, but these days the paintings by the Mexican artist Frida Kahlo are some of the most famous in the world. The beautiful paintings of Leonora Carrington are like fairy tales come to life, and she's now considered a very important surrealist artist. There are so many possibilities for exciting projects based on the work of the surrealists that it's difficult to know where to start, but I'm going to begin with a fairly simple project based on a famous painting by René Magritte. And we are going to do this project using sponges instead of brushes. That is to help us make sure the color is very even, and because I want to use one or two special techniques. So the first thing you need to do is to paint the sky, and I normally tell you not to mix a lot of color, but this time we will need quite a lot of color to cover the entire paper with this summer sky blue. So use your sponge, dip it in, and then just dab it on. Try to keep the color as even as possible, and don't leave any white spaces. And when you've finished dabbing, leave your paper to dry. Once your painting is dry, or almost completely dry, you can start to create the clouds. And for this you will need white paint and a piece of sponge. I've cut a piece because it's better if it's a little bit smaller for this. And then you just dip your sponge into the paint and then dab it onto the paper. Clouds often have quite an elongated shape. They're not necessarily round like marshmallows. They tend to be a little bit longer towards the edges. And once you are happy with your clouds, leave them to dry, and you really must leave them to dry before we start the next step. When everything is dry, we are going to use something called a mask for our painting. And luckily this has nothing to do with COVID, but just like a mask hides your face, a mask hides part of a painting so that we can put colour on top and still see what is underneath the mask. I have more or less made a copy of Magritte's original bird, and I have put a file on Seesaw for you with this drawing so that you can just cut it out. With a mask, you should probably use thin cardboard rather than paper, because we will be putting paint on top and it will get wet. If you must use paper, try to use thicker paper for this. You can also see more or less now where the mask will sit and what clouds you can see underneath, and I added one or two slightly smaller ones so that the effect will be more impressive, hopefully. Yet another thing with masks, of course, is that they need to be fixed to the page, or at least you don't want any paint going underneath them. So I'm going to use some sellotape to hold it down, but as I've said before, sellotape by itself will just rip paper. So I'm going to use my usual trick, which is to stick the tape first to a shirt or some other piece of clothing and just peel it off, and that sort of makes the tape hairy. Actually, it stops it being quite so sticky, and you can just test it just to make sure that it's not going to rip your painting. You will need several strips like this, so and then just turn them over and stick them to the back of your mask. When you have got all the tape applied, turn the bird around and stick it onto the painting. The wing should be pretty close to the top. There should be some space at the bottom. Look at the original painting to help you place it properly. And then just stick it down. And now we need to mix the colors for a stormy sky. So you'll need blue, black, white, and maybe even a little bit of green. Make sure that you have plenty of the color and make sure that it's relatively thick. And then we are going to again take our sponge, dip it in and apply it to the top of the painting. Try to put the sponge down as evenly as possible, and that will help the mask work properly. So on top, like so. I would like you to stop dabbing when you get to about here, so just above the legs. And then you can also just vary the colour in the background here a little bit. Just add maybe a little bit more black in places, a little bit more blue or white. This is very much like the effect we created earlier with the clouds, because this is in fact a cloudy, stormy sky. But again, be careful how you dab. Just move the sponge directly on top of the paper so that it doesn't slip underneath the mask. And when you've completed the top part of the painting, I'm going to ask you to add a little bit more white to your colour and a tiny bit of yellow or orange, because the part towards the bottom is lighter in colour. It looks almost like a sunset or sunrise. So a lot more white here. Start with the lighter grey. Try to blend it in as much as possible and be careful with the little legs there. And then a little bit more of the white and some of the orange, just for the part at the bottom here. And as a final touch, we're going to just paint the sea at the bottom. And again, you can just use the grey colour that you've already created. Maybe make it a little bit lighter. We're not going to do this in any real detail, we're just going to paint lines across the bottom, like so. To under the tail, and then you can use some of the white paint just to add some sort of wiggly lines into that grey, so it looks a little bit like the tops of the waves. And you might want to just blend them in a little bit. And now we can take off the mask carefully. If your paint is still very, very wet, don't try this until it is dry. But in my case, I think I can try that. And it's looking okay. Oops. As a final step, just like in the painting itself, if you want to, you could just paint a little bit of blue just above the bird's head so that you can see that more easily. But you don't need to do this. And that's your Magritte. Of course, you can do it in much more detail. You can spend more time dabbing the sky. You can spend more time trying to paint the sea as well. Or you could experiment with your own creations. Make your own mask shapes to reveal the sky in the background. It's up to you.